Welcome to Tech Brothers. In this video, we're going to learn how to set up availability group when SQL Server instances are installed in cluster mode. In this demo, we'll be learning a scenario. Scenario is 4-node cluster. I'll show you in a second. And the AG limitations, we will discuss that in our scenario. And also the overview of the requirements that we have, some requirements, and based on those requirements, we're going to create this scenario. Gentlemen, this is the snapshot of our scenario. We have 4-node cluster and we have 2 locations. If you notice right here, we'll go through first the overview of this scenario and understand the requirements, and then we will take a look on the setup, how we set up our cluster and how we set up our availability groups. First thing up here, you will see that we have 2 locations. One is Charlotte and other is New York. In this requirement, there are 4-node cluster, 2 node reside at Charlotte at this location, and 2 node reside at New York City right here. But the requirement up here is Charlotte SQL Server instances should fail to Charlotte node only. What it means is that all the SQL Server instances that is installed on Charlotte nodes, both are sort of active right here. Some instances of SQL Server running on TBS node 1, which is in Charlotte, and some SQL Server instances are running on TBS node 2, which is in Charlotte as well. So the first requirement is that there should be cluster failover between these 2 nodes. So if node 1 in Charlotte, TBS node 1 goes down, all the SQL Server instances that's running on node 1 should fail over to TBS node 2 and vice versa. So this is automatic failover. This is our first requirement, and a limitation up here is that the requirement says that they should not fail over, the SQL Server instances running on TBS node 1 should not fail over to New York location. The failover, Windows cluster failover, should happen between just the Charlotte. However, if you look on the right side, this is the same scenario for New York. So TBS SQL is 1 node that's in New York, and TBS client, that is also another node that is in New York. So all the 4 nodes share the same disk. That's the requirement of our 4-node cluster, and we can't get away from that. So up here, the requirement number 2 is CLT instances should not fail over to New York, as I said. Number 3, New York SQL Server instance should fail over between New York nodes only. So we went through that too. Number 4 right here, I made a mistake right here. AG should be set up between Charlotte and New York. So the SQL Server instances running on Charlotte side, the availability group should be the SQL Server instances running on Charlotte side and SQL Server instances running on New York side. So how we accomplish this, the availability group is between 2 locations. However, failover is just location to location, just the same location. So let me go ahead and give you overview of this setup that I already did as far as a cluster goes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create, right now I have created already availability group between these 2 locations, but what we're going to do is we'll go through the demo of creating availability group. If you watch my previous videos, before that we had 2-node cluster, and 2-node cluster that was on same location or even in different location. In 2-node scenario, what we lose basically is Windows failover, automatic failover cluster. So the SQL Server instances that running on 1 node will not automatically fail over to the next instance, because that was our availability group requirement, that they cannot be the possible owner and you cannot set up availability group that way. However, we accomplished setting up availability group. However, what we lost was failover cluster automatic between those 2 nodes. But here we have a totally different scenario, and the scenario is 4-node cluster. Both are different location. Now the possible owner of SQL Server instances running on this location, Charlotte location, will only remain on Charlotte, and New York will remain on New York. However, availability group will be set between these 2 locations. So let's go ahead and take a look on our cluster. If you take a look on my cluster, let's take a look on the nodes first. As you can see, I have 4 nodes. 4 nodes are up. TBS client and TBS SQL, these two nodes are in New York, and TBS Node 1 and TBS Node 2 are in Charlotte. And let's take a look on the roles. We have 4 SQL Server instances. 2 are running in Charlotte and 2 are running in New York. As you can see, New York SQL UAT, New York SQL Prod, they are on New York nodes, and SQL UAT and SQL PROD Prod up here, they are in Charlotte. So these are 4 SQL Server instances. What we want is that these 2 instances, UAT and Prod, should run on Charlotte location. Node 1 should hold SQL Prod, Node 2 should hold SQL UAT, so they'll be in active mode. But if something happened to Node 1, Prod should come to Node 2 in Charlotte, and same with New York right here. And this is availability group that is set between, I'll show you in a second, that is set between New York SQL Prod and SQL Prod right here between Charlotte and New York. So storage, let's take a look on storage. All the storage should be shared, and they're all right here. As you can see, this is the shared location and shared location of all the disks. So let's go ahead and go through the setup. Our first requirement, if you notice, is that Charlotte should not fail over to New York. So if you take a look on the, let's take a look on the New York SQL Prod, that is a SQL Server instance running in Charlotte. So if I right click on here, go to properties and go to advanced policies, you will notice that the possible owners are only Charlotte nodes right here. TBS Node 1, TBS Node 2. I took these off TBS client, which is in New York, TBS SQL, which is in New York. So I took that off of possible owners. What it means, if you take something off of possible owners, you cannot fail over that particular application to that node. So that is what it means. They cannot own this particular role right here. In my case, it's a SQL Prod, that is SQL Server instance. This is role. They cannot own that. Even if you try to fail over manually to TBS client and TBS SQL, it will give you error that they are not possible owners, so you cannot fail over any role between these 2 nodes, TBS or TBS SQL. So this is how we accomplished this SQL Server instance to stay in Charlotte nodes. So let's take a look on UAT, and you will see it's the same thing right here, Node 1, Node 2. Let's take a look on New York. Go to properties, advanced policies. As you can see, Node 1 and Node 2 have been taken out from possible owners. That means that this role, particular New York SQL Prod, cannot fail over to Charlotte. So this is how we accomplished our requirement that they should not fail over to different location. They should fail over among themselves at the same location. So now availability group, this is the availability group. Let's go ahead and take a look on SQL Server Management Studio. All right, let's go ahead and connect with TBS SQL Cluster, SQL Prod. This is in Charlotte. And take a look on availability group right here. This is our availability group as you saw in our cluster. So let's expand that. Let's take a look on the replicas. As you can see that New York and the replicas are, one is in New York, which is secondary at this moment, and other is in SQL Prod, which is in Charlotte. So we have accomplished setting up availability group between Charlotte and New York nodes right here. Right now, for demo purposes, I only have one database that is being replicated, or that is part of availability group. I have not created any listener, so this is the setup. Now what we're going to do, just to take this demo a little further, we are going to fail the node SQL prod right now is on TBS node 1, and we're going to fail over to the same node, the other node in Charlotte. So we will see that what happened to our availability group. So let's go ahead and fail over this SQL Server instance. Let me quickly show you. If I try to fail over to New York instance, it's going to give me error. This is the instance that is in New York. I'm going to select that, and it says that the action did not complete, and you can take a look on the more information. So let's take a look on the information. It says the operation failed because either the specified cluster node is not the owner of the group, or node is not a possible owner of the group, which is correct because we took that out because of our requirement. We don't want this particular SQL Server client, which is in New York, to be part of a automatic failover. Otherwise, we will not be able to set up really availability group. So click OK. And now if we try to move this particular role to Charlotte, it should work fine. This is TBS node 2, Tech Brothers node 2, and it is in Charlotte. So let's click OK. And as you can see that it's failing over. As right here, notice that availability group failed. So watch what happens when it comes online on node 2 in Charlotte. Let's see if our availability group comes online on its own. So far SQL Server instances coming online. Alright, as you can see that as soon as SQL Server SQL prod came online on node 2, which is in Charlotte, our availability group came online as well. So this is good. This is great news because we want, when we accomplish that, there should be automatic failover between Charlotte and availability group that's set between New York and Charlotte. It came online. Keep in mind that in availability group, when you do it in SQL Server in cluster mode, your automatic failover is not possible. That's availability group limitation in this scenario, that automatic failover of availability group is not possible. However, we accomplished automatic failover between the instances on one location. Availability group is set up in different location, but you have to manually basically fail over to the other location. The automatic failover is not possible in availability group. Now let's go ahead and fail over manually our availability group to New York and see if it works fine for us. So here is the availability group. If you notice, this should be the, let me open this. This is our availability group. What we're going to do is fail over our availability group to New York. Again, this is manual process and you have to do it manually. As you can see right now, New York cluster, New York SQL prod. This is where we have set it up. And it asks us that there would be some data loss. Are you okay with that? And I said, yes, I'm okay. So click next and click next. Connect the New York instance right here. Connected, click next and click finish. And let's look at the more detail. Now it's failing over to New York. As you can see, it's successful. Now if you notice right here, the availability group on SQL prod, which is in Charlotte, became secondary. And let's go ahead and connect with New York instance and see if it is primary. Yes, as you can see, AG test SQL, this is our availability group, is primary on New York. So this is how basically we accomplished this particular scenario. And now what we're going to do is I'm gonna go ahead and create an availability group between other instance, which is right here. Sorry. this instance, SQL UAT to New York UAT. This is going to be our next demo. We're going to go ahead and set up availability group between SQL UAT, another SQL Server instance, to another SQL Server instance in New York. Alright, let's go ahead and set up availability group between SQL Server instances that is residing on TBS Node 2 in Charlotte and SQL Server instances that is residing on TBS client in New York. Here is the setup. Right here, my SQL Server Management Studio. This is the SQL Server instance that is running on Node 2 right here, as you can see, SQL UAT, and we're going to go ahead and set up availability group between SQL UAT and New York UAT. And right here I'm connected with New York UAT, and the database that I am going to set up availability on is customers, and as you can see right now there is no database. Since the file location is totally different in between these two SQL Server instances on both nodes, we have to initialize the database on our own in order to set up availability group. We do not want availability wizard to try to create the database or initialize that database for us. So let's go ahead and initialize our database. The requirement for initializing database is exactly like mirroring. So we're going to go ahead and restore the database and keep it in restore mode. So keep in mind that you have to have a full backup and then transactional log backup. You need to restore it and keep it in restore mode. So I'm going to go ahead and click on device and add the device. My backups are at central location. /software. As you can see right here, customer backup, full backup, and customer TRN. This is transactional log backup, so I'm gonna go ahead and add both. Click OK. Alright, full backup and transaction log backup is right here, so let's go ahead and go in files. Since these are different files than S and R, we're gonna go ahead and say relocate all files to the folder. This will pick up the location on the next node. So this XNP, this is the data, and this is the log on our New York node. Option, we want it no recovery. Since we're initializing the database, click OK. Alright, the database is restored and it is in restoring mode. That is the requirement for our availability group. So let's go ahead and set up availability group of customer database. Right now I don't have any availability group, so let's go ahead, right click on and click on new availability group wizard. Click next and name the availability group. I'm gonna say customer underscore UAT CLT to New York. So this is my availability group name. I'm gonna say AG up here so we would know this is availability group. Click next and this is the database that meets the requirement, so we're gonna go ahead and click customers. The requirement is that you have to have a full backup taken of this particular database backup. This is the prereq of availability group. So click next. Now here we're going to go ahead and add the replica, which would be our New York UAT instance right here. And it is added successfully. Let's go ahead and make it read-only. Readable secondary, I'm sorry. Endpoints will remain the same. I'm not going to configure any of that. Just we're testing the availability group between two different locations, between SQL Server instances that reside on two different location nodes. So click next. And in this particular scenario, we're going to go ahead and click on join only because we have already initialized the databases. So click on join only. next. As you can see that it skipped a lot of stuff. This is just a part of initializing the database, so it skipped because we told it to skip it because we have initialized the database. Click next and finish. Click on more detail to look at it. Alright, everything went successful. Let's close this and right click, refresh the databases. As you can see that customer database is synchronizing right now, and this is the primary group. Let's take a look on the availability replicas. As you can see, New York is our secondary replica and Charlotte UAT is our primary replica. Let's go ahead and fail over this availability group and see that if New York UAT becomes primary. Right click on the availability group, click on failover, click next, and accept the data loss. Click next and connect to our New York UAT. Click next, finish, click on more detail, alright, failover completed. Close and refresh the database. As you can see, it's synchronized and this is secondary, and let's go to the availability group on New York UAT, and as you can see this is primary. We're gonna go ahead and fail back, and then we'll go on our cluster and see that how it behaves on the cluster. So let's go ahead and fail back to our primary in Charlotte. Click close. As you can see, this became primary and this became secondary. So our availability group is all set and it's manually is failing over. So let's go ahead and fail over our Charlotte UAT from node 2 to node 1 and see how it behaves as far as our availability group goes in our cluster. Here's my clustering. As you can see that SQL UAT is on node 2. We're going to move this to node 1 in Charlotte. And you will notice, let me show you real quick, right here is our AG customer UAT CLT to New York. This is the new availability group that we created. We're gonna watch that, what happens when we fail SQL UAT Charlotte from node 2 to Charlotte node 1. Click OK. As you can see, this is pending and this has failed, and see if it comes online on its own once the failover of SQL UAT completes to node 1. Alright, as you can see, as soon as SQL Server came online, the availability group of customer database came online on node 1. Let's take a look that if this is still primary and secondary. As you can see that this is secondary. Let's refresh this. Primary. Alright, it's refreshed and availability group is primary on SQL UAT, even though the SQL UAT is failed over to node 1. So basically this is it for this scenario. We have created 4 nodes and 2 different locations, and we have a automatic failover between these 2 nodes. Let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to go ahead and turn off TBS node 1, and we will see in our cluster that if it fails over automatically to node 2, and everything is still set up for us. So let's go ahead and do that. This is Hyper-V, so I'm gonna use Hyper-V Manager, and I will go ahead and turn off TBS Node 1. That means we're simulating the concept that something happened to TBS Node 1 in Charlotte, and we want everything to go on Node 2, and we still want our availability group to work. Let's turn it off, and let's go back to our cluster, and see, as you can see, that availability group is stopped. SQL UAT is moving to Node 2 from Node 1. Alright, everything is running. Let's see if our Node 1 is down. So as you can see that we turned off Node 1, something happened to Node 1, everything is still up for us. All the roles are up. We can connect to SQL Server. We have availability group still running, and it's good. So basically this is it. This is what I wanted to show you, that the setup between 4-node cluster. Keep in mind that this is availability group requirement, that all the nodes cannot be the possible owner. Otherwise you will not be able to set up availability group between SQL Server instance that reside on different nodes in your quick architecture right here. I hope it helped.